Okay. So if you follow me on Instagram, you already saw that video that I did, but I was like, that was only within the week? Like that happened before, like that, wow. Anyways, I got this demo drive with a Cybertruck. Oh, it was on Thursday. That's exactly how I know when it was. So I have to tell you, I know I'm nuts. I'm really, really crazy.
Funniness to the story.
I'm really crazy, but I was in the mall with Daniela for her birthday, my 10-year-old, and she's like, we go into the Tesla store. So I said, sure. She's looking around. It's so much fun. And then the next thing you know, they're trying to sell me the Tesla. So I said, so the lady came over to me. No, it's so my type. I mean, the thing like screams away from it. Like Cybertruck is the hideous, most ugly. I can't even.
Yeah.
So the lady comes over to me and she saw this with my daughter. She goes, you can arrange for a test drive for this thing. I was like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm not so interested in buying a Cybertruck. So she comes and she whispers in my ear. She goes, it's kind of like one of the things that Tesla offers. Like you can take it even overnight. Like just sign up, take it. Like I didn't know if she was being like a good salesman or like really understanding that like this could be fun for my family. I don't know. Her name was Serena. Anyways, the next thing you know, they're sending you all these, they get your number. They're sending you all these personalized tests. Do you want to test drive the Cybertruck? Do you want to test drive the Cybertruck? Anyways, my husband's birthday it was last week. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go test drive the Cybertruck. I'm going to take my husband. We're going to go test drive this Cybertruck. My husband is simple. Things do not faze him. Cars do not faze him. He's happy with his little Corolla. He could not be, no, he doesn't need it. But we figured for thrills, we'll go and take it. So I started freaking out as I go to the mall and look at this thing. And the first question I asked the guy is like, has anybody ever crashed one of these? Like, is there anything I need to be nervous about? Like, have you ever gone on a demo drive and someone's crashed the car? Like, I'm thinking this, oh my goodness. And then I see the huge truck parked and I'm like, I need to repark it like this when I return this tomorrow morning. And he goes, yeah, but don't worry. This thing parks itself.
Right.
I'm like, okay, my mind is about to be blown. Anyways, I could make a very, very long story out of this whole thing. No, I didn't crash it. But what I want to tell you is the following. We had to try the self-drive mode. You had to try it if you're test driving a Cybertruck. So when we're driving home, my husband is trying it. I have a 5-minute video of it. It's very black because it was dark outside. And I'm shrieking the entire video, just screaming. I'm like freaking out. I'm like, and he's just sitting there with his feet up and he was really able to, like, he was a little bit nervous, but okay, he's able to give up control. We come home, it's 10:30 at night after our little like birthday date, driving around together. And my kids were still up. Now I'm like, of course we're going to create a memory here. When else am I having a Cybertruck in my house? So first I see a strange car in my driveway. I call home. I go, who's at our house? I do not need any more attention to the Cybertruck that is coming in. I'm going around the block. I want them out. It was like my daughter's friends, a bunch of them over. I'm like, no friends over when this Cybertruck is coming over. You're going to think I'm the looniest mother ever. We take my kids around and first my husband goes, then I go around and I said, I'm going to try the self-drive now. Just around the block. Easy peasy. Start going, it's going. And as the stop sign is coming up, I start shrieking. I'm like, oh my God, it's not stopping. Oh my God, it's not stopping. And I slam on the brake. Okay, now if you slam on the brake, you're done. Like it disables the auto drive. So it'll tell you auto drive disabled. And I drove back home by without it driving itself. And I came home, I pulled into my driveway and it hit me. I can't describe to you how strong this lesson hit me, where I said that I think that the lesson of driving the Cybertruck on self-drive taught me the way that we run our lives and a very big lesson about faith. And there's different ways. I had very deep discussions about the Cybertruck and faith and self-drive. There's different ways that you can understand it. But my takeaway was that we run our lives and we think we have faith. I'll just say I think I have faith. I act as though I have faith. I do, I say I have faith. I talk to Hashem. I believe. When it comes down to it, I slam on the brake. When it comes down to life, we still try to control. We still try to do the thing, even when we see that clearly God is sending us every message that this is our package that we must surrender to and accept. But we slam on the brake and we push back And I don't know where the end of that goes, like what disables, because God continues to give and will continue to send us lessons. But it was such a heightened awareness for me in terms of like understanding what it really means to surrender. Surrendering really means like knowing with full certainty the Cybertruck is going to drive and I don't have to slam on the brake. Everything's going to get to its destination exactly the way it's supposed to be. Now, my point is not have the same faith in a Cybertruck as you do in the Almighty. That's not at all my point. But my point is, it was a very strong awareness of how we try to live our lives and how we can control. And for me, I know what my work is cut out for me. It's very, very clear to me how we still try to control. So that's my introduction. I highly recommend doing a demo drive in a Cybertruck. It is really, really fun and kicks, total kicks.
It's very scary. My friend 2 years ago, in Israel, every second person is driving.
Electric car. Oh, Teslas, yeah.
Because, they are very advanced and it's like sitting there and
It's
no
very scary.
control and it's scary.
It's very scary. It's very scary. That's what I'm telling you. I was screaming the whole time. It was very, very, very scary.
About parking, that's even.
The parking was actually, that was incredible because like I mean, have you guys done it? Hello?
No.
Have any of you tried the self-driving?
car and it has some.
The self-drive park, you just press it.
I don't do it.
Oh my gosh.
You should practice it.
Mhm.
So my husband
Yeah.
does it.
Yeah.
We were at that Tesla showroom like many years ago when they first.
First.
And the teenage son was drooling over this. It just came out. And I remember saying to him, in 15 years, you can have this car used.
That's so funny. That's really, really funny. Yeah, well, what made me realize is that it's just gonna be a matter of just, who knows, very short time till robot cars are on the on the roads. Like, it's very soon.
San Francisco has already.
They have it.
There, it will be
My
wonderful.
boys took a self-driving Uber.
Yes. Oh, they actually went
They-
somewhere
they
in a
did.
self-driving
They
Uber.
took a
See, I'm like,
self-driving
Are you
Uber. I was
in
so
California?
you
terrified.
did.
I was like,
It's so,
"They're wet,
yes.
no wet, they're having fun."
Sephora,
It's so scary. Hi, Valerie. We're talking
Your-
about my
your-
Cybertruck.
your screech was priceless in the video.
I didn't even show you the good videos. You got to see these good videos where we're actually driving. It's just pitch black. Okay.
Can I toot your horn for a quick second?
Yeah.
Not my own horn, your
What?
horn. So, Devora and I study privately on Thursday morning. So Devora calls me and says, I have I have a slight emergency. I'm gonna need to be driving. And I'm like panicked that like something happened in her family, but
I did not use the word emergency. I
Not
just said
emergency.
something important came up.
Came up and I'm gonna need to be driving during our talk, which rarely happens, but Devora taught me how important it is to stick with your regimen. Like, we're all here. When when you commit to Torah study, you do it. And we've had some hilarious stories about studying when we were both
All over the
across
place, yeah.
world, really. But anyway, I was like, okay, we're doing this. And so we're talking, and then she mentions as she's driving that she's in this Cybertruck.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't know how this thing works. And we're like still talking about Torah. And she's like, I don't really know how to press this or do this or whatever, but it's all good. It's all good.
Well, the funniest part is that it comes up that what is my urgent situation? They just texted me that
Yes,
they
sorry.
had a rent, like of somebody who's a demo. So my return time was just bumped up. So like, get the car back now. I'm like, now
Study Torah.
I have an appointment. They're like, we need the car back.
Yes.
So that was it.
It was so, tribute to you though. that you
Oh, yeah,
multitasking
tribute to you.
car.
Oh my gosh. So then I said, yes, it was Torah from the Tesla.
From the Tesla.
Torah from the
And I said,
Tesla.
you're probably the first woman to study Torah in a Tesla. She said, or in a Cybertruck, we said. She said, well,
Maybe.
definitely this one, because it was new.
It was a brand new, I was the first one driving that car. So there you
Role
go.
model, even when multi.
Partially driving it.
Partially, I fully drove that car. I did not partially drive that car. I couldn't give up the control. Okay, that was a major digression. We're back to ambition, giving and taking. We left off at a very, very fascinating point last week, which only gets a little bit more fascinating. But in order for me to dive into this one, and I realized I was going to have to start this class with this announcement as Sharon made her point at the end of last class. So we're going to be getting into the concept of empathy today. And I just think that it's really, really, really important to recognize and like fully recognize. And this applies for all of life, but specifically for what we're going to get into today. And that is that what we're about to express, and Debbie, you even alluded to this a little bit last week, but we're talking about the highest of heights. Meaning we are not, I don't mean to, I'm just going to speak for myself. I don't know if I will ever achieve this in my lifetime. So you might say to me, well, then why are we learning it? Like why are we reading Strive for Truth? And why are we learning this if it is so lofty? And the reason is that because one who is constantly striving and understands where at least we're trying to get is better than one who doesn't even understand what the ideal life living should look like. So as we're going to be reading about these levels, you're going to feel, I mean, if you don't, please tell me, because you probably are a very holy person. As I read these, I felt very like, what? Like that, are you joking? Like like that is so lofty to me. And the answer is yes, it is extremely lofty. It is extremely high levels. But it doesn't mean that just because it's a very high level, we shouldn't be aware that there, number one, have been people in this world who have accomplished this. We're not even talking about like saints like Moses. Like there are very, very, very special humans who have gotten to this place. And number two is that when we know how high the bar is supposed to be, you know, it's like when you know the bar is up here, you say like, how high can I jump? Chances are, if we know that we're supposed to be up here, we'll land lower. But it's if we only think the bar is here, we'll land even lower. So just keep that in mind, that this is striving. This is a very high ideal, and it's something that we should continue striving towards, even though it might feel very out of our reach, okay? So I'm gonna just, every class, I feel like I have to just do a quick recap. And we've established that there are givers and takers in life. Ideally, we want to become total givers. Everything is defined whether or not we are a giver or a taker. We moved into the topic of ambition, where we understood that ambition is like a bottomless pit, and that when we are only trying to fulfill our own hunger, our own drive, our own striving, it will never ever be satiated. And at the end of last class, we solidified that what is the antidote to this? How do we cure this? We become givers. When we recognize all that Hashem has given us, we recognize that everything we have is a gift from the Almighty. We become receivers of that gift. We feel not only, this was a nuance, we feel not only satisfied, but we feel happy with our lot. And then once we're happy with our lot, we can then become givers. And we said that that level of giving from that level and being so happy from that is a higher level than fear of God. It comes from a place of loving God. Okay. So that's my like 2-minute summary. I think it's very important to recognize that, again, that place of understanding that whenever we feel complete, it's always easier to give. Whenever you feel like I have everything I need, of course I can give, it's so much easier to give. When we feel like we're lacking, we want to hold on, whatever it is, whether it's physical possession, something that we're protecting. When we feel like we're lacking something, we're much more nervous to be able to pour it into somebody else. When we feel like it's so complete and it's so whole and this is everything that I need and I'm so happy with this, so much easier to give. In fact, if you think of the top people in your life, if I would ask you to think of the 3 top givers in your life, you would probably say that one of the top qualities that they had is that they were just so happy with everything they had. Because a person who is truly happy with what they have is always able to pour over to somebody else.
We are growing. When you grow and you feel full with yourself, you can give. For me, it's growing. It's like the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah, it's the levels. You start from the beginning, and the higher you get, you be more spiritual.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You have the 10 Sfirot,
Yeah.
and you're growing with that.
Yeah.
You start from nothing.
But you're saying you're growing in your mentality, you're
growing in yourself.
You're growing.
learning.
Right. Yes, this is true. So this is what we're up to. So now we're going to understand something very, very lofty today. But I think really, again, really, really interesting. So we left off last week. I'm going to repeat the last piece that we said, and we said this is going to be discussed in the next chapter. And I'm going to read it again because I had to read it like 15 times. So I'm going to read it again here because if you're only listening to it, you for sure need to listen to it probably even more than 15 times. So he says that over here, we still have to consider the status of compassion and sympathy. I happen to think, once again, these words are a little bit diluted in his English translation. He talks about the concept of nose be'ol. Okay, is anyone familiar with the Hebrew terms nose be'ol im chavero? Does anybody know what that means? Okay, it's actually a mitzvah. It's actually one of the 613 commandments. That is that you are supposed to be able to. Nose means to carry. Be'ol means the yoke or the burden. Im, which is very important language, with your friend. You're supposed to be able to carry the burden with your friend. It doesn't say carry the burden for your friend. It doesn't say to carry the burden next to your friend. It says that you're supposed to be carrying the burden with your friend. What is the best English translation for this term? Empathy. Okay. So he's going to use the word empathy, but it's really nose be'ol im chavero, okay? Carrying the burden of your friends, which is a Torah commandment. It's something that we're supposed to do. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of all men, it says that his level was so high, the level of completion that he got to was so high that it almost was like he was so filled. The language that's used is like he was so filled with godliness. His like so much of his essence, not ever to think that he was God, but he was like so filled with godliness. And one of the traits that's specifically spoken about is this level of empathy, that he was so able to not be focused on himself, but be able to pour into somebody else. So this is just important to understand. He doesn't use the word empathy. He uses the words nose be'ol im chavero. These are certainly among the highest qualities of mankind. Yet, they do not seem to fit into the category we described above. The person who has these feelings is troubled by his neighbor's distress. He feels his neighbor's lack as his own. And by helping his friend, he is, so to speak, helping himself. He assuages his own pain. Is this not the same as experiencing a lack and its fulfillment, which we have found above to characterize the wrong type of ambition? Now, I'm just going to reiterate what I said before. High level, okay? Because empathy in and of itself, you might already characterize as a very high level trait, right? People who are really good at empathy are very special people. People who could really empathize with another human is a very, very special person. But what he's pointing out over here is such a nuance in empathy, in nose be'ol, is saying that when one is doing it from a place of feeling like you see somebody going through a certain amount of pain, so you are empathetic to that person, you carry their burden with them, but you're really only doing it to assuage your own pain and your own discomfort. Now, we're going to see what he says about it. It's still a wonderful, wonderful thing. But recognize that it technically is coming from a place of being a taker and not from a place of being a giver. Is it lofty? Absolutely lofty. Is it a level? Yes, it's a level. So we're going to understand a little bit deeper what the highest, what we're striving towards, which maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. As long as we're striving, it's okay. And understanding that maybe the way that we've always thought about empathy needs a little bit of tweaking. And I think I'll just say this before we get into it in the next chapter, which is going to be chapter 9. I think a very good litmus test for this, and I'm curious to hear what you think before we even delve into it a little bit more, but I think a very good litmus test for this is how you feel about somebody that you don't know at all. What does your empathy look like towards that person versus somebody that feels very close to you? Now, you might say, Devorah, that's ridiculous. Like, of course, you should be more empathetic to the people that are closer to you. And the answer is, of course, you should be. but you could still define how you are feeling in terms of your empathy, in terms of your nocebo ol, in terms of carrying another person's burdens. You could still define by thinking about what your empathy is like for a total stranger.
Well, it depends on say someone has, that you lost your husband and someone else loses their husband, but it's a total stranger. Your empathy could be deeper
That is absolutely true.
than for another,
Similar life circumstance might make you feel, okay, so
Right.
maybe, okay, so that's another example. That's true. That's true. But it is just really interesting to think about, right? Like the people that we generally are empathetic for are those who we really know and have learned to love. Are there cases, maybe even in this room, of times where we didn't know anybody and have learned to have empathy and to learn to give? Absolutely, there are. But that's a very interesting litmus test just to think about. Just keep that in mind in the back of your heads, okay?
Deborah.
Is there a nuance there though? Because empathy, the way you just said it, people that we're more inclined to have empathy for them because we know them and then we give. But isn't there an aspect of empathy where it's not necessarily just the giving, but of the experiencing that person's emotion, experiencing what they're going through?
Yeah, so that's where I feel like the part of the empathy definition in a psychological term might be getting us a little bit messed up, a little bit tripped up, because
Okay.
empathy is, right, you're all thinking of the Brene Brown clip, getting into the pit. Does everyone know what I'm talking about?
Instead of looking at.
Exactly, like
Sympathy,
so
empathy.
sympathy is like looking down and be like, hey, do you need a sandwich down there? Like it's dark, it's cold, you must be hungry. Like that's sympathy. Empathy, and then she shows the little bear like climbing down. Empathy is going into the pit with. So from a psychological, like the psychology world has very much discussed the difference between sympathy and empathy would be more similar to this Hebrew term of nocebo olam chavero, but not necessarily that you feel the heaviness of, more in terms of giving. I think that's what we want to be focusing on.
It's so important, and maybe I missed that thus far in the conversation, because when I looked it up, like even a definition of it is the
Empathy.
ability to understand and share the feelings of another person.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not necessarily what we're talking about. It's
Well,
giving to that.
Well, but it starts with first understanding, meaning let's go back to the greatest of all men. Let's talk about Moshe Rabbeinu for a second. What happened was when he was actually about to become the leader of the Jewish people, he was growing up, he was a prince. He was in Pharaoh's house, but he always knew he was a Jew. And he was going out and he was, even though he was so sheltered and so safe and so secure, he physically felt the pain of what was going on to his brothers and sisters that were suffering and that were being enslaved. And that feeling was what led him to action, to be able to do, to be able to
To
act.
do something.
But it started from a
Feeling.
place of feeling.
Okay.
It's hard to just be a giver without feeling. Also, true empathy, if you're just giving and you're not trying to put yourself into their shoes, it's not really giving.
But there's the aspect of it where you're just feeling it and not doing
And not
anything
taking
about it.
action.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about also with giving, yes, coupled with, that is well said, yes.
We keep going back to like the conversation we've had over and over again, where sometimes it's easier to give to people and try and show empathy for people you don't know as well as the people closest to you.
Okay, that could be true. It could be true, but let's just imagine that somebody was very sick on a hospital bed, right? And one of the people is a very close relative of yours and one of them is a stranger. It's gonna be much easier to be there physically, spiritually, emotionally, like all the things for the person that you know, as opposed to the stranger, yeah. Okay,
Deborah.
yes, sorry, Valerie, yes.
That's okay. Two things. So one, and so this idea of being empathetic from a place of a giver versus a taker. Your point of always striving to do differently. It's not suggesting that you not be empathetic.
So we're gonna get there now.
Okay.
We're gonna get
and
there.
then-
No, it is not suggesting not to
Okay.
be empathetic.
'Cause I'm thinking of that.
Exactly the contrary,
Okay.
yes.
And then the other question is, last week when we ended, we
Sharon.
talked about considering compassion and empathy, are we also going to be addressing the compassion piece, or you're just rolling that into the?
I don't remember how exactly we like differentiated it last week. I don't remember exactly, but I think that empathy without compassion can't exist. Like, what does empathy look like without compassion? I don't think there's really empathy.
It's part of-
Gotcha.
it's part of
I
it.
think so. I think so. I think there has to be that compassion. I keep referring to Sharon's point because I think it was like kept on being repeated over and over in my head this whole week because I kept thinking, do you remember what you said?
Well, I think I was talking about, working with people with disabilities and how
No.
No, was.
that was probably my next thought, though.
Oh, no, you were saying that Rachel listened.
Yeah.
She wasn't here, so she knows what you said.
Yeah, I
from
know
her-
what you
from
said.
past.
Yeah.
You want to tell her what she
Yeah,
said?
what you said was when you said when you have empathy for other people, it also impacts the way you might look at the things that you have in your life. And
I think
your
because I didn't
appreciation.
have enough time to go
Fully
into it,
explain.
and that was, and
Oh,
that
so
was.
it was
and that
talking
was
about
the
someone with
example,
disabilities.
right,
Oh.
because I used to run group homes for adults with developmental
Mhm.
disabilities, and these were, people, adults who were mobility impaired, had severe to profound, we don't say that anymore, but developmental disabilities. And, just watching them try to struggle through life. And afterward, I just felt like I got nothing to complain about. It just kind of put life into perspective for me because there are people who are so challenged on a day-to-day basis. And, the empathy kind of also provided me with, forcing me to take a different perspective on life.
Right, 100%. And even if you think about it, for our children, we try to do the same thing. We show them, we try to expose them to different situations that might make them recognize like how blessed, how lucky, whether it be going to visit sick children or going to be involved with people who have special needs or whatever it is. Like even just visiting the elderly who are so impaired and recognizing like you're young, you have a gift to give, like live your life. It starts from the time that they're very young.
Right.
So, and that's all beautiful. And I'm not saying don't do it because it's such an important quality to living. But recognize that if one were to go into a situation and say, I really need to work on X, Y, and Z. I need to fill myself up with a feeling of gratitude. I'm going to go invest in these people or like a social justice trip, which like we've led before. Like I'm a big advocate for these things. They're amazing. But recognize the difference. Recognize when you're doing it, when it's coming for a place to fill you versus like, I am going to go feed those starving children in Somalia because they need to be fed.
Right.
It's different.
Right.
It's still an amazing thing and an amazing quality. And I'm not saying don't do it, but at least be aware it's not coming from a place of total giving. There is a selfish component to it, which we're going to see now is fine. It's fine. It's just not
But I
the
think
highest
you
level.
can start with just wanting.
So that's what we're gonna.
help
That's
everything,
exactly
and
what we're
then
gonna start.
realizing, wow, it really is feeding myself.
That's exactly right. That's what we're gonna talk about now, which I introduced this topic at the very end of last week, which is the concept of lo lishma. So that's what we're gonna understand right now. Okay. So he says, if this is the highest level, how can one acquire this level of equality of giving? Before a person reaches the heights of human perfection, he is a perforce deficient. Okay. His actions proceed from the experience of lack and the need to fulfill it. He does not yet possess that noble urge that flows from this innermost satisfaction and joy, which we have described in the previous chapter. So, what happens? Here's a very important line. On the way up towards his goal, where we're heading towards, he must make good use even of hunger-based urges whose aim is the satisfaction for personal selfish desire. So the first step is recognizing, hold on one second, like I want to do it. It's coming from a place of a hunger, even if it's, by the way, even if it's spiritual or emotional hunger. Right? We like in the beginning, we were like kind of thinking of hunger as like status or money or fame or whatever it is. It's also coming from a place, even if it's emotional, it's coming from some kind of a hunger. Even sometimes the hunger is to be a giver itself. I want to do chesed. I want to do kindness because it feeds my soul. It feels so good. That is beautiful. And that is such a level. And also recognize it's still feeding your hunger. But he says that the first step is to recognize exactly that. To be like, this feels so good. This is the right thing to do. And it's coming from a hunger base. It's coming from a place where, like, I feel hungry to feel something. Now, if we didn't have that hunger, we would never do, right? So Hashem places that hunger inside of us because otherwise we would just be like slugs, right? We'd just be like sitting there like ants, like slugs. There's no better idea than slugs. So you would just not move. We would just not have any desire. So there's this hunger that, like, it's like an itch, like we want to be able to give. But he says the first step is to follow that hunger, to see where it's going. What is this coming from? And recognize it's coming sometimes from a place of a selfish desire. Right? I tell people all the time, even in this metamorphosis challenge that I created for these tween girls, we have a whole component on kindness, on giving. And my whole lesson to them in that whole chapter, that whole segment, is telling them that you will feel so much better when you can learn to be a giver. And there's nothing wrong with teaching that to children. We need to know that. We do feel better when we give. We do. The best way to build our own egos is to be givers. That is the best way. And also, you understand? Okay, yeah.
That's why I grew up in Israel. Every Friday, we used to give money. Truma. So they're teaching you how to give
I'm just curious, that's beautiful. Why do you call that truma?
because it was Truma for Keren Kayemet.
But why do you not call it tzedakah?
Okay, for us, it was a Truma.
It's so interesting. Truma is usually more of like, it's like produce.
Yeah.
Trumot and maestro.
The minute that you teach a child every Friday, every week that you have to give,
Yeah.
and I grew up like that.
Yeah, I think most of us grew up like that. I think we can all nod. We grew up like that. We have to give.
We still have the box of Keren Kayemet,
Beautiful.
and whatever you give.
It's beautiful.
And you grow up with that. So it's
Yeah.
part of your life,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
but you have to teach them.
For sure.
The empathizing piece is the interesting part.
Right. We haven't dived in quite
Okay,
deep
when
yet, but
you
yeah.
See someone on the street missing a limb, you feel
Mhm,
horrible when you see that, so you give them something, but it's.
By the way, sometimes yes, sometimes no. You
Right.
say I give them something.
Right, maybe,
Yeah,
right.
okay, not everybody
Not
gives.
always.
Okay.
right. But, but true empathizing is when you, so it's just an example hit me, my machatana, my, in-law, how do you say it in English?
Everyone knows I'm not.
You don't need it.
She's a.
There is no, what is the English?
She's a pediatric oncologist. So right away, she chose a field that's very,
Ugh.
passionate and giving. She went into the hospital, she has all these patients, she shaved her head. So that she can really connect and feel what they're feeling.
Unbelievable.
So that's like
Unbelievable.
true
Yes.
empathy.
True empathy.
That's beyond.
That's in
That is
the,
a
like, in the
different-
pit with them.
That's
right?
not-
And she has a short haircut, she has nice hair, she's like the
Wow.
rest of us.
Wow.
Very high level. Very high level.
To make herself feel better.
No, that's high level giving.
That's really profound.
That is probably, that's an amazing example. That's very high level giving.
Wow.
That's very, very high level giving because she probably did not gain anything from that other than, feeling like she's empathizing, like she's really able to empathize. It's very high level giving. It's amazing. Beautiful, beautiful story. My aunt, everyone has their own stories with empathy. I remember my aunt years ago, I was a little girl when she did this, but she had a friend who was going through a terrible addiction and was, it was an alcohol addiction and she was trying to become sober. And my aunt had an addiction, quote unquote, to chocolate. She loved, loved, loved chocolate. And she said, you know what? If you are not touching alcohol anymore, I am done, b'li neder, I am done with chocolate from here on in. For over 20 years, she has not had an ounce of cocoa, a lick, nothing.
That is
So that's very, very, that's giving. That's real giving. Yeah, it's amazing. It's a very high level of empathy.
Did it help her friend's addiction?
It just her friend knowing that somebody else was also holding back from something that was such a big part of her life was very empowering. Over 20 years. She won't touch chocolate. She won't, nothing. Like she won't, you know.
Well, now she's over the cravings.
She's over the craving, but even when I look at her, like she put out chocolate chip cookies, like she doesn't even, it does not, it's like she's allergic. She doesn't touch it. And she was only doing it from a place of empathy.
It's like Trace now.
Yeah, I think she looked at it like that. Like it's off limits. It's just great. I always say that with children. Like, you know, you see in the supermarkets and they're standing on the checkout aisles and like they could want every single thing. You tell them it's not kosher and somehow they're fine. Like they're just, okay, it's not kosher, I won't eat it. Like they're trained that they will not touch it. So maybe it was that level, but that's high level. These are examples of high level empathy. Beautiful, beautiful examples. Okay, so now we're going to understand a little bit more about practically what this actually looks like. For example, so he's, just to reiterate what we just said, it's okay that it starts with that hunger base, but pay attention that it's coming from a place of quote unquote hunger, okay? It might be a good hunger, but it's a selfish desire. For example, in his service of God, he will act what we say in Hebrew, shalo lishma. That is to say, out of concern for himself, and from shalo lishma, he will endeavor to reach lishma. I'm going to explain this in 1 second. He'll do things out of fear, that is, he'll be afraid of punishments for himself, and he'll perform mitzvot with the idea of receiving the portion allotted to him by the master to his servants. That is, he will look out for the reward for himself. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here for 1 second. He's bringing first the example of the idea of lo lishma, which we established last week in Ethics of Our Fathers. It talks about this idea that when a person needs motivation, they should start lo lishma. They should start not for the right reasons, in hope that they will get to lishma. Okay, if you need the reward. And we said even we do this for little children. This is the way that we train our brains, right? If you meet with most people who are trying to help you reach a goal, they'll tell you what will feel good to your body. You have to first make the body happy. What will feel good to your body? If you hit this goal, what will make you feel good? Do you need a massage? Do you need a spa? Do you need to buy yourself a piece of jewelry? Like, what do you need so that you feel like you're nourishing? That's great, but recognize it's coming from you're doing it for the ulterior motive. There's an ulterior motive involved. But the goal over here is that once you start to taste the sweetness of what it actually feels like to accomplish the goal, you will start to do it more on your own. Now, what he says over here is that even with, I just want to point this out, even with spirituality, sometimes we do spirituality. We do a mitzvah. We perform a mitzvah. We do it because we're afraid of the sin that will come if we don't. He says that's a low level way of connecting with the Almighty. You're doing it. You're doing it out of fear, and you're doing it because you don't want to get punished. You're not really doing it because you know that this mitzvah is feeding your soul. End of story. No other reason. But as our sages tell us, even with a commandment, it's better to do it for the wrong reason, even if it's totally out of fear. You're afraid lightning's going to strike, whatever it is. You do it out of that, in hope that at some point, maybe at the last day of your life, right, you get to the level of this is really done for the real right reason. Okay, so he's bringing the example first of what it comes from spiritually. And then he says that in commandments between man and man, now remember, no se ba'ol, this idea of high level empathy is actually a mitzvah. So he says in a mitzvah between man and man, in addition to these motivations, he will act out of compassion and sympathy, which are not motives of pure, unselfish love, since basically they are self-centered and their aim is to avoid the pain caused by seeing the other person's distress. I'm going to read that sentence one more time. He will act out of compassion and sympathy, which are not motives of pure, unselfish love, since basically they're self-centered, their aim being to avoid the pain caused by seeing the other person's distress. Now, does anyone have a question on this sentence? Okay, good. I'm glad that resonates. Okay, so we're going to finish this next sentence and then we'll discuss. All these motivations are based on taking, since in the final test, one is acting for one's own benefit. It's all coming from that place. But it is highly advisable to make use of all the motivations of this kind for spiritual purposes. This is the meaning of that difficult saying of the rabbis, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. okay? Which means you shall love Hashem, your God, with all of your hearts. How do you say, Sarah, how do you say heart in Hebrew? Lev.
Lev,
How do you say your heart in Hebrew?
הלב שלך.
Which in one word is?
ליבך.
Libcha. Libcha. So why do we not say, V'yahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol libcha?
בכל לבבך.
But we say b'chol levavcha. It's not the right grammar. So Rashi comments, does anybody remember learning this?
Extra bet.
It's twice.
What?
They threw in an extra.
Yes, there's an extra bet in there.
Yeah.
There's an extra bet, which we know the
Which is
numerical
extra.
value is 2. So does anybody remember learning this? Why is this wrong grammar? It should say you should love Hashem with all singular, your heart. We only have one heart. Rashi comments, and he mentions this over here. B'chol libcha, b'chol levavecha is bishnei yitzrecha, with both of your inclinations. What does this mean? What does this mean? You should serve God with both your inclinations. Okay, here is a new insight. Because when we learned that, which we did learn a few years ago, when we learned that idea, we said you should serve God with both your good inclination and also your bad inclination. And we went into all different examples of what that actually looked like. Over here is a new level of understanding. It's saying that also serving God out of that bad inclination, that place of the selfish hunger, selfish compassion, selfish drive, my own fear of punishment, whatever it is, that's considered a bad yetzer, a bad inclination, and that's okay. You can still serve God with that. B'chol levavcha, with all of your heart, serve God with it. Don't just dismiss it just because it's not coming from the best place. So the person on the way up must make use, and that's a very important word, guys, the person on the way up, striving, okay, must make use of his bad qualities themselves, that is, his selfish urges for the sake of his own spiritual progress. I'm like blown away by this paragraph. I cannot get over what insight this is telling us over here. And I think that even if we leave today and in a year from now, we still find ourselves in the same place, still feeding those quote unquote selfish hungers, still feeling like we need it to assuage our pain or our feelings of like, I need to know that I'm doing something, because if I don't feel like I'm doing something, then I just feel helpless, which is beautiful. But recognize, God, I'm doing this to serve you. And I also recognize it is coming from a selfish place. Maybe one day I'll get to doing this from a place that is completely selfless. Maybe.
It's saying, don't be so hard on yourself.
So exactly. So what I appreciate about this last paragraph is that, and that's why I kind of feel like that introduction today was so important, because it's important to recognize that it's lofty heights. And also, while we are striving, give yourself the compassion and understanding to know that it's okay. You are meant to also serve God with that place that is no good, with that place of that ichiness that's inside of you. Yeah. Side point for a second, because I also just love it and it's worth saying right now, that another beautiful explanation. I remember my husband teaching this to me and I was just like, it felt like light bulbs were going off. So I'll just share it again with you. But another explanation of that idea of serving God with both of our inclinations means that if we actually do have what we would consider like a bad inclination, like a certain drive that feels like a lust or like a certain distraction in life or something that feels like it's like pulling us down, like it's like defined as like what we would say like a bad inclination, there is a way to show up and use it in a way to serve God. Whether it means help other people with the same struggle, whether it means, God, I'm coming to you for a very small scale example. Let's say I'm working on prayer and I'm very distracted, okay? Very distracted by my phone, very distracted by my thoughts, very distracted by life, okay? But I'm trying to pray, I'm trying to connect. So that would be considered the Yetzer Hara, okay? Pulling me away from what's important. But I can turn that distraction and I can use that distraction as a way to connect. You can use that distracting thought and engage in conversation with God around that conversation. Something so simple as, oh God, here it goes again. Here's my thought about my next thing on my to-do list, and turn that thought pattern into a prayer, into serving God. So there are ways that we can channel our bad inclinations and recognize that they can also serve purpose in our growth. That's the point of B'chol Lavavecha, that it doesn't B'chol Lavavcha, that it doesn't have to be all good. We have that place, like Lynn said, with so much compassion, right? Compassion on ourselves that it's okay. And also, while we're going through it, to recognize that it's a ladder. We're striving, striving. And I think the first step to it is the recognition. Okay, any thoughts? Any thoughts, or shall we continue? Yes, Valerie.
I would love for you to somewhere write the phrase, like I want to see Levavcha the way you think it should, like I want to see it written in Hebrew the way you would think it should be.
I
and
could
then-
write it out for you, but I'll just tell you, it's Libcha with one bet, Libcha. I could send it to you in a text, Libcha, Lamed Bet Chaf. But the way it's written in the Torah is with two vets. It's Levavecha. It's with two. Levavcha. B'chal Levavcha. Two.
So interesting,
Grammatically makes no sense.
but thank you. I mean, so interesting.
Okay, God, I'm so happy. They're all laughing.
You earned your keep today, she said.
I earned my keep. I'm so happy we taught you something new.
Big time.
What I think is interesting is that he brings that line into this paragraph. That to me was very, very interesting. Okay, I'm gonna read a little bit more, okay, and then we'll stop. It's still not snowing. A wonderful idea. Oh, not till 3. Okay, great. We have all the time in the world. And I don't even have a dentist appointment for my kid. Exactly. A wonderful idea suggests itself here for helping oneself to acquire the quality of giving. The artistic talent is a divine gift to man. Speaking of which, has anybody read The Artist's Way? Has anyone here ever read it? You read it? Nancy, I was like, if anyone has read it, it would be Nancy. Okay. Okay, she's quite, I am just being exposed to this woman and her writing for the first time, but it is fascinating. Okay, it's whole spiritual journey,
What is the name?
The Artist's Way. And she gives the different, thank you, Julia Cameron.
Oh,
Yeah. I think she's quite old by now.
prove I read it?
Yeah, you definitely have read it. So she's a writer herself. She goes through a journey, and it's like a very spiritual journey, but she gives a lot of prompts that are like very, very enlightening, a lot of which are through writing. Anyways, the artistic talent is a divine gift to man. It enables him to use his refined imagination to sense the most subtle nuances of human character, imperceptible to others, and to express them in the spoken or written word, in sculpture, or in painting. He's going to go on now. He's going to give us a tool. What is this tool going to be? It's going to be the concept of creativity, imagination. Okay, we've pulled this in other places, but here we say over here. One would have to be a very great artist to give full expression, for instance, to a mother's concern for her children, the wonderful intimacy and profundity of her feelings. She herself needs no art. She acts and feels according to her nature. But when artistic expression is given to these emotions, they must make a profound impression on everyone. Hashem has implanted a spark of the artist into each and every one of us, each according to his ability. Whenever we use our imagination to picture something to ourselves, this arouses our emotions and makes its impression upon us. This is something to the greatest value to anyone who is in training himself to develop his emotions in the direction required by the Torah, and similarly with the quality of being a giver. Before we arrive at the ultimate goal of joy and ecstatic attachment to God and love, which form the basis to true giving, as we have seen, that connection with God, we can at least try to picture ourselves, our neighbor's worry, and we can at least try to picture to ourselves our neighbor's worry and distress in all their details and nuances. The sympathy and compassion thus engendered may move us, here's the point, Beth, to actions of loving kindness. Similarly, we can picture his relief and happiness at obtaining what he so sorely needs. The knowledge that it is in our power to cause our friends all this happiness must surely make giving easier for us. I'm almost going to be done, then we'll discuss. But for the picture to work, we must already have a measure of loving our neighbor. If this is insufficient, then we can make use of service from fear. We can feel it to be our duty to be a giver, and our imagination can tell us how a giver ought to feel. We must also try to do as many acts of loving kindness as possible and trust that the repeated actions will influence the quality of giving deep within our hearts. So we'll pause here for a section. No, 1 second. But when we have achieved the quality of giving itself, we shall no longer need imagination. We shall no longer need this works of art. Our new nature will take charge. Our giving will be pure, flowing from the goodness of our generous hearts, and no longer bear any relation to self-need or self-concern. I want to tell you, I will never forget this story. Rabbi Noach Weinberg, who started the entire Aish Torah movement. He was at a conference years ago, and he went to his hotel room. It was late at night. Somebody walked past his door. My father used to tell us this story every year. Somebody walked past his door, and they heard him sobbing. They thought something went terribly, terribly wrong. And they knocked on his door to check in with the Rosh Hashiva, with Rav Noach Weinberg, if everything was okay. And they found Rav Noach Weinberg sitting on the floor, sobbing. And they said, Rosh Hashiva, is everything okay? And he said, Oy, what's going to be of the Jewish people? There's so much pain. There's so much assimilation. There's so much lack of awareness. I feel the pain for my Jewish brothers and sisters. And what we learned from this story, what we found out afterwards, is that this was something he did multiple times a week. He would sit and he would think of the people that were in pain, the people that were drifting either physically from ailments and illness, mentally not well, emotionally struggling, spiritually drifting, whatever it was. And he would sit on the floor and he would cry. That is a leader. That is somebody who takes the level of imagination and puts it into such a place. But what's the difference? Why am I bringing this story? Because did he just sit there and wallow in the thoughts of sadness that he had over his Jewish brothers and sisters? No, he turned it into action. He said, what can we do to help provide? How do we provide a resource? How do we provide a home? How do we provide something that could create nurturing and continuous learning for our Jewish brothers and sisters? So, and we have many stories, whether it be different illnesses that have created certain hospitals or like different things. People can take whatever they're empathizing over, whether it's something that they themselves had to go through or not. I think that's interesting to notice the difference. Sometimes they go through it, sometimes they don't. To feel the pain, to imagine the pain, and then to turn it into action. It's a very, very, very incredible thing. And it starts, he says, with the koach hadimyon. It starts with the power of imagination, understanding what it must have felt like. When we talk about Pesach, we often start talking about what's the first sense that you need to start getting into when you're starting to get into the mode of Passover. Tapping into the power of imagination. What was the slavery really like? What did it really feel like to our Jewish brothers and sisters? Can we think about it? Can we feel it? I mean, we're so far from it. Now, maybe because of this terrible situation we're going through with the hostages, we feel a little closer just in general. But what sense are we supposed to be activating? Koach hadimyon, the power of imagination. That's what he says. He says it has to start from the place of first loving. Exactly. That's exactly what he said.
Sometimes the fast days are like that. We're so
Ideally.
far removed, but we try to think about what happened.
What happened,
thousands of years
exactly.
ago and feel it.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So different people have it different ways, different people can connect to these different things. But what he's saying is that the power of imagination can be a tremendous, tremendous tool to feel another person's pain, to really, really think what they're going through. And not from a place opposite to what you're saying, that like, if I expose myself to it, it feels like I have so much more gratitude, but that sometimes it actually hurts. It physically hurts when I really put myself into somebody else's shoes that's really, really suffering. It's too painful. It's so, so, so painful. But he's saying that when it comes from this place of starting from a place of love and wanting to give, that only good could stem from that. That means that you are a total giver. Yeah.
Aren't a lot of us going through that though now with the Hatufim?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot. I don't even think it's just it's the Hatufim, it's everything. It's the whole war. It's the situation, it's the kibbutzim that were shattered and their lives were turned upside down. It's the soldiers who were killed and the families that have to be that are left trying to live their lives as normal without family members. It's the reality of life in Israel right now. It's very, very, very high.
600,000 people left the house for a year and a half. They
insane.
don't live in their houses. And they live in the center of Israel.
Yeah, beyond.
600,
Beyond.
crazy. But one day it's gonna be fine. So, amen.
Amen.
So,
Amen.
amen.
We do have to believe, but it's rough. So yeah, I mean, all of this, the power of imagination. I think one thing, when I went to Israel and I was standing at the day that I lost it the most was outside of Kfar Aza. I was a wreck. But I think that it hit me very strong that for like that whole year leading up, it was only my imagination. It was only what it must have felt like. And then you're standing in their homes and you're seeing the paintings on their walls and you're seeing their positive affirmations and you're seeing their mezuzahs and you're seeing their coffee and their tea and their everything, their life, and just gone. So it's like the level of like me thinking that I was able to imagine it and then standing there and actually seeing it was even there was a disconnect over there, you know? But to harness the power of imagination, to use it in a way, the tool that he's giving us over here is to use it in a way, the power of imagination, to harness it and to use it in a way to become more of a giver is a very powerful tool. It's a very, very powerful tool. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording. Any questions, comments?
Are you saying that when you're doing these actions, like I can think of things I've done over the years, you should sit back and think why you're doing it?
That's the first step that he's recommending is to recognize the root of where it's coming from.
I mean, if you just enjoy doing it and there's no reason.
Then that's it. Just say this feels good. This feels good to me. This makes me feel good. That's fine. That's a high level. And there's higher, but that's a very high level.
No, but I never said to myself, this makes me.
So that's what I'm saying. That's the first step is just the awareness. Like, where is this coming from? What am I doing this?
Think of all the years that I drove and dropped packages in the community for many, many years, maybe 10 years. It never dawned on me. I mean,
You're just doing good. Yeah, you're just doing good. Just because,
So
yeah.
last.
Beautiful.
week,
It's a big success.
Last week I hosted here the elite unit of 669.
I know. How did it go?
100 people. It
Wonderful, Sarah.
was beautiful. And they're helping everybody, Palestinian, Syrian, earthquake, whatever. And this guy came to me and said, oh, I really love it, but I don't like when they help the Palestinian. I said, when they give everybody. And I don't want to be like them. I want to be like 669 to continue and to give.
So nice.
It's like in the hospitals in Israel. there's
Yeah.
no-
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
No
That's
restrictions.
true. It's a good.
100%.
no difference.
It was amazing.
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
My dad always home had Arab doctors in the hospital.
Most of the doctors in Israel are Arabs.